I thought you all might enjoy a bedtime story. This is a story that I wrote probably 3 or 4 years ago for a contest, actually. It's called Rails, Romance, and Revolvers. So here goes, and I hope you enjoy it. Alice Mackenzie sat in her seat with her face in a book and a birdcage at her feet. The door to her cabin opened. She didn't look up. "Dante's Inferno, eh?" a gentleman said to her. She peeked out of her book and nodded, then went back to her book. The gentleman removed his hat and coat and set them on the seat next to him. Then he sat down and looked at Alice. "It's very rude to stare," she finally said, not taking her eyes off her book. "I'm sorry," he said. "I was just admiring your little friend. What's the little fellow's name? A canary, right?" "Leopold," she whispered as she looked up. Their eyes met. His blue eyes shimmered. He smiled. She became warm and buried her face back into her book to hide her rosy cheeks. Leopold's a pretty grand name for such a little bird. "Well, what's your name?" She looked up annoyed. "Jim," he said eagerly. "Well, it suits you," she said, and looked back to her book. Jim laughed. "I'm sorry, maybe we got off on the wrong foot." He extended his hand. "I'm James Walker." "Alice Mackenzie." She shook his hand. "It's a pleasure, Miss Mackenzie. So, I'm guessing you and Leopold are running away together?" Alice shook her book. Alice shut her book, placed it on the seat next to her, and picked up her birdcage. "Yes, we are moving to the big city. Right, Leopold?" She blew kisses at her bird affectionately. "I wish I had somebody to treat me like that," Jim said and laughed. Alice pretended not to hear him. "So, Mr. Walker, why are you going to New York?" "I'm on this train to find my fame and fortune," he said. "Really?" Her interest piqued. "How do you intend to do that?" He looked at her and smiled. "Well, I'm a writer, and—" "A writer!" She jumped out of her seat. Jim waved his hands and explained, "I'm an out-of-work writer, actually for the newspaper." "Oh," she said, sitting back down. "I know what you're thinking. There's no life in newspaper writing. But I'm telling you, the newspaper is going to make me famous." "If you say so," she said. Jim became quiet. He recalled the words of his last boss. "Your writing stinks. Get out and stay out." He wanted to change that. "I suppose you're a writer too?" She looked at him apologetically. "No, I'm going to New York to be a singer." "I guess I'm not the only one looking for fame." "Yes, you are," she said. "I mean, I grew up on a small farm in Nebraska. I'm so tired about hearing about a woman's place. I'm not seeking fame in New York. All I want is happiness and excitement. Is that too much to ask for?" "Certainly not, dear Miss Mackenzie. Would I be too bold in asking for a song? Right here? Now?" She blushed. Jim opened his pocket watch and looked at the time. "Heavens, is it really so late?" Alice sat confused. "I'm sorry, I forgot about an important appointment with a man a few cars down. I'll have to join you later." He grabbed his coat and hat and left. Jim raced down the aisle. He found the cabin at the end of the wagon. He went inside and reached above the door into a small compartment. He pulled out a bag of clothes and emptied them onto a seat. He stripped down to his long underwear and threw his other clothes into the bag. He pulled on some ratty pants, boots, and a shirt. He wrapped up a bandana around his neck and placed a cap on his head. On the seat lay a Colt revolver and a belt full of bullets. He tied the belt around his waist, cocked the revolver, and stuck it in his pants. He hid the bag of clothes in the compartment and left the cabin. He walked toward the end of the train. Soon he would enter the luggage car. He imagined the loot he'd take, the bank rolls, the jewels, the stock certificates. There must be $1 million worth. As he walked, he smelled an odd odor in the next car. He decided to pay it no bother. He went to the door. A long piece of wood nailed the door shut. What the hell? He grabbed his revolver and used the butt to pry up part of the wood. It became loose and he was able to pull it off. He opened the door and heard a loud roar. The four-legged creature stood up and looked straight at Jim. He froze in fear and the lion roared again. Jim turned and ran, and accidentally leaving the door open. He ran as fast as he could through the cars, and the lion followed. He fumbled for his gun, but his hands were too shaky to clutch it. It fell to the floor and went off in a loud explosion. The sound scared the lion, who turned the other way and ran. Jim finally made it back to the cabin, only it wasn't the right one. A lady screamed and held onto her husband. Jim put his finger in his pocket and pretended he had a gun. "Hands up!" A knock on the door interrupted him. The door opened. It was Alice. She looked at the bandit, and at the people, and back to the bandit. Jim, what are you doing? If I can't get on the paper, I'll get in it. Is this what you meant by fame and fortune? Miss Mackenzie, you wanted excitement. You're on the right train. Jim grabbed Alice and kissed her passionately. She showed his trigger finger to the people. No gun. They exhaled. Yes, I did, she said. Did you know there's a lion on the train? The circus is in town, he said as he pulled her close and stole another kiss. So there's your bedtime story. Hope you liked it. Good night.